Hi everybody, my name is Matt Beck. I am a rising third year at the Yale Law School and going to be a member of Shabtai this coming year, my last year at the university. Before I start kind of diving into just the beginning of the evening, I would like to ask if everybody could turn their phone off. It's a custom of ours at Shabtai events to make sure that everybody's fully engaged. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, Shabtai was one of the first communities, actually, that I got to know when I came to the law school. There was a dinner one night with Judge Boggs from the Sixth Circuit, and I had the pleasure, of course, to meet Shmully and Toby that evening. And it's really been, I think, my favorite home at Yale University since I've been there. It's certainly one of the only places on campus, I think, where folks can speak freely and openly and exchange ideas in good faith, which is so vital for any student, but especially an aspiring lawyer. And I'm so excited to be joining the community as a member this coming year to be able to hopefully give back and help coordinate some of the dinners that we host. But this evening, I really wanted to thank Dan and Marlene for hosting us so graciously. One of the things that I think is most amazing at Shabtai about Shabtai is the fact that not only do we host events with such interesting speakers in New Haven at the Anderson Mansion with students at the university on any given Tuesday or Friday night, but we also host events across the country and world, from New York to Boston to Israel and everywhere else in between. So thank you both so much for having us. And this evening, I'm very excited for the conversation that we're going to be having between Shmully and our guest, Liel Leibovitz. They're going to be speaking about the Talmud, and I had the pleasure to participate in a crash course on Judaism with Shmully this past semester over bagel and lox every Sunday morning. And one of the things that I asked him about every week was if we could really dig into the text, which again, as a law student, you love to do. And I see that he's brought along quite a lot of flyers to pass out tonight. So we'll all get the chance to do a little bit of a interpretive reading, I guess, of the text as well. I'll pass over to Dan really quickly just to say a few remarks. But again, thank you all so much for being here with us this evening.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's a real privilege for us, first of all, to meet all of you. All of you are exceptional, and all of you are exceptional in different ways. I want to start by thanking my wife, of course, for hosting all of us. And I want to give a special thanks to my three kids, Ethan, Matthew, and Sophia, because this is my Father's Day gift. They said, "What would you like for Father's Day?" I said, "I want you to come, please come to this event with Rabbi Shmully and with Liel Leibovitz, because it will be great."
Wow.
Okay. So my task here, Shmully invited me to do the honors of interviewing Liel, but I thought it made a lot more sense for Shmully to interview Liel. What I want to do is simply say how much I respect and appreciate Toby and Shmully and Shabtai, which I've come to know relatively recently. And when I think about Shabtai, what I think about is courage. You guys have the courage to speak the truth, to speak to people who don't agree with you, and have the impact of being able to convert them on campuses and in cities, in private events like this one. That's really in short supply. Too many people in our society are in their own corner talking to their own people who already agree with them. I personally can't think of any endeavor that's more useless than that. What we have to do is reach out to people who have a different perspective, a different set of views, a different set of experiences. Okay, in that regard, I want to take a moment to introduce our guest of honor tonight. And my kids know that I'm not really much of a groupie, but I am a massive groupie for Liel Leibovitz. I'm like Alana Newhouse, the founder of Tablet Magazine, basically says that I'm sweet because I'm so effusive about Tablet and Liel and
what we've done to you.
Okay, I'm in that phase of my life, right? So, Liel, I'm not going to give you his whole fascinating background, but I strongly encourage you to talk to him about it and to look it up, because he is truly a fascinating individual, and I would say certainly one of, if not the most interesting erudite public Jewish intellectual on the scene anywhere in the world right now. And he skips between US, Israel, Europe interchangeably. In my mind, I don't want to age myself overly here, but okay, he's some mashup improvement on Leon Wieseltier, Charles Krautheimer, and Ruth Weiss, okay, who were big thinkers of our generation. Liel's official position is that he's the editor at large of Tablet Magazine. If you haven't read Tablet, I suggest you just read it once, and you'll never stop reading it. I mean, I can't wait to get it, every day. Liel.
Pitching for the buck too.
Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to get there. Well, I was just about to get there. Okay. Liel does multiple things. Okay, he writes. He runs the Unorthodox podcast, and recently has started writing Devarim Torah in English in a very sophisticated, accessible way for Tablet Magazine every week. Just to give you a sense of the breadth of his intellectual activities, just a couple of things that I read in the last kind of year and a half from Liel. Right before the war, maybe 2 or 3 months before the war, he wrote a brilliant piece arguing that Israel had to begin to wean itself off U.S. assistance that is tied to the sale of U.S. weaponry and become independent for its defense needs. We're right in the middle of the absolute necessity of doing that right now. And I'm talking, this was, it must have been last summer, it was well before the war started, okay? Then Liel wrote, Marlene and I are from Montreal, so excuse me, but he wrote a tremendous piece on Jewish Montreal, which is really very interesting because we as Jews from Montreal were sort of minorities within minorities, right? We grew up at a time of real French nationalistic fervor. So did Max's uncle, who lived down the street from me. Okay? I was best friends with Max's uncle. We were partners in the DJ business. We did everyone's bar mitzvahs and sweet 16s. But being an Anglophone Jew in Montreal in the 1970s was a unique experience and gave you a unique, let's call it, understanding of outsiderness that has stayed with us, apart from the bagels, which were highlighted in Liel's articles.
Which are the best.
Which are, of course, the best. Okay. Liel, I remember the podcast that he did recently on a Netflix series, which I highly recommend, called Abnormal, starring the grandson of Moshe Dayan as a sort of neurotic, frustrated journalist who can't quite put a Facebook. That's how I feel about trying to write a book, which I've been talking about doing for the last 25 years. And finally, the latest article, at least the latest article that I've read, which Liel published last week, was maybe the best demonstration of all, where he, in a book review of a book called Knife, about the attack on Salman Rushdie opened with several paragraphs referring to Rabbi Eleazar, who we all know from the Passover Haggadah, because the Rabbi Eleazar, as you remember from the story of Passover, is sitting around with a bunch of other rabbis. These are all guys from the Second Temple era, and they're debating and talking about the story of Passover, and then a young student comes in and says, well, hold on a second, guys, it's time to say the Shema. So then there was a whole debate over what takes precedence, and I'll leave to you guys to find the answer to that, or maybe Ruby will tell us, but I think if I recall correctly, the Shema takes precedence over the story of Passover at the Seder, correct?
The Shema includes the story of Passover.
Yeah.
It does, but it's time to say the Shema, so you have to stop telling the story after staying up all night and say the Shema.
There's actually a Talmudic debate about whether you can say the Shema and fulfill.
Okay. So we're going to get there. We're getting closer to the topic of tonight. Okay.
It's all about losing yourself.
Yeah. So this article that Liel wrote for this week's edition of Tablet Magazine was basically, I mean, it had some tremendous disclosures about the redemption of this rabbi, who it turns out was, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, he liked women, and he died seeking forgiveness. It was about being human, Liel's article was, and it tied the human frailties and shortcomings of this rabbi to the recovery of Salman Rushdie and his finding out what it meant to be human by nearly dying in this attack and by being helped to recover by his wife. So, Liel Leibovitz wrote this book, How Talmud Would Change Your Life. I was raised in a secular family, and I've been on a journey for many, many, many years, not sort of crazy over the top Baal Tshuva, but steadily learning more. And, I'm there with Torah, I'm there with Mishnah. Where I start to find resistance is in Gemara. So we're going to learn tonight, I hope, from Rabbi Shmully and from Liel, what's what, where the lines are drawn. We have the 10 statements, okay, which we know were referred to as the 10 commandments, but they're not really 10 commandments. We have the oral Torah that was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, and then we have the rabbinical interpretation over the years. We have two Talmuds, the Babylonian era Talmud and the Jerusalem era Talmud, and then we have rabbis that have been going for thousands of years arguing over interpretations of those. Where do you draw the line? How far do you go? Because there's no end to how much you can learn, and it's all really interesting. And I have to tell you, as a amateur student, it's all really fascinating, and what we're going to learn is it's all very much relevant. So I'm sorry for that lengthy introduction, Shmully, but I'm going to turn it back over to you now, and now we're going to listen.
I'm actually, Leo, thank you so much, Marlene and Dan, and the rest of the family. Thank you all for welcoming us to your home. I'm going to let you start, but I do want to open with, if possible, is that a candle in that?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have, I think you're mic'd.
Oh, I'm mic'd, correct. Thank you, Toby. So I got a text message on my way here. Toby was driving from New Haven, and I got a text message from a dear friend who happens to be sitting to my left, whose name is Jack Bozier, and it said, and Jack also came down from New Haven. Jack's at the Divinity Schools at Yale, and a dear friend of ours, and he said, today is the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the passing of my Jewish grandfather, Milton Paskaner, known as Michal, to our people. Could we please light a candle for him together at some point tonight in his memory? And so I thought it would be a great schus to open the evening by actually, is that okay?
Yeah, you want to say Kaddish too?
Maybe we can do that. Sure. Yeah, at the end of the evening, you're supposed to say Kaddish after.
First you learn, by the way.
Yeah,
That's the Rabbanan, though.
So, memory.
Really, you say the Rabbanan after
Yeah.
you learned them, but you want to say Kaddish.
We're gonna do it.
Mel,
Okay, sorry, turn my
Mel, do
phone
you
off.
want a cuppa?
Sure, thank you.
I'm gonna just bring you a new one.
Oh.
By the way, today is the 15th anniversary, literally today, of the establishment of tablet law.
Thank you.
We're celebrating that too.
I would just introduce Liel by saying that I actually was forwarded that article that you mentioned tonight about Israel weaning itself off American support by someone, and it was actually in the context of a very dear friend of mine, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's an alum of Shabtai, who believes the same thing and actually advocates for it, which raised a lot of controversy. And after having read so many of your pieces, Liel, it was that one, I believe, that triggered me to call our office, Holly, and say, we got to get Liel up here. And you did come up so kindly, schlepped up to New Haven, as we say, and delivered a fantastic talk over Shabbos dinner for our students. And as you reminded me tonight, didn't get served dinner until 2 o'clock in the morning, but that's sort of common.
So you know, it's a good event.
Did you read anything?
I didn't need to. I was nurtured by the energy, and it was fantastic.
And the only regret I had about the evening was that we didn't have a recording of it. So that's one of the wonderful things about Shabbos. It lives on in your mind and heart and soul, and for those who were in the room. But I said, we have to do this. We have to have you again. And you were kind enough again to agree to do the talk here. And thanks to Dan and Marlene and family, we are here tonight. So thank you very much. It's all yours.
It is a great pleasure, though I feel that with such effusive introductions, I am absolutely bound to disappoint. So I apologize in advance. But Rabbi Shmully, Dan, Marlene, thank you so much. It is not often in dark times like these that you could actually be in a room with people and feel truly inspired, truly moved by just a company of people who are here for all the right reasons. And this is not a minor thing. It's not a trifle, because things are indeed very grim. And so I wish to start by doing the thing that I think our people have always done when things got dark, which is tell you one of my favorite jokes. So right outside St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome, the Vatican, there were these two beggars. One of them looks a lot like me, with a big scraggly beard and payas and a big black hat. He's dressed exactly like a Hasidic Jew. And next to him sits a gentleman with his head shaved just so, with a big wooden cross on his chest. And they each have a tin cup in front of them. And as the day goes on, people walk by, and this being Vatican City, you can imagine, what happens. And so it's now 5:30 p.m. And one of the bishops, on his way home from the office, walks by and sees these two gentlemen. And he sees the one with his head shaved and the big cross sitting there with a cup filled with coins and bills. And he sees the guy with the beard and the black hat and the payas, and his cup is empty. And he feels, the bishop does, a sort of surge of good Christian charity. And he walks over to the man with the black hat and the beard, and he puts his hand on his shoulder and he says, "Son, this is the Vatican. You may know we're Christians here, my boy, and as you can see, the person sitting next to you, good Christian, has his cross, and that is why he is receiving more money. So if I may suggest that tomorrow you may pick a different place to apply your fare." And the beggar says nothing, and the bishop walks away. And when he's just out of earshot, the beggar with the beard and the black hat looks at the other one and says, "Look who's telling the Goldberg brothers how to run their business." I love this joke because it seems to me to capture a profound essence of what it is that we do when the world seems to rise and crush us. And for so long, this has been exactly the story of the Jewish people, tucked away in some dusty corner of the Middle East, under the thumb of a succession of empires that sometimes were indifferent, often were, malicious, and very rarely were benevolent. We had to come up with some sort of way, with some, to quote my Rebbe, Elazar Cohen, better known to some as Leonard Cohen, another fine Montreal Jew, we had to come up with a manual for living with defeat, a way of being in the world specifically and precisely when things got crushing. And what we did was deliver onto humanity the greatest self-help book ever written, the Talmud, which is a ridiculous thing to say about a work that is 2,147 pages long, in 63 volumes. It is now late June. If you're looking for a perfect beach summer read, may I suggest not the Talmud? Terrible. Also, not very comfortable to travel with. I did it once. The overhead and extra pay are intense. This is a book that, at first glance, was not really designed to give any real comfort to real humans. But once you stop and consider what it does and the circumstances under which it was conceived, you understand just what a great, quoting Leonard again, engine for survival this thing truly is. And so let us, since Dan suggested or brought up that great moment in the Passover Seder, let us look, like every good superhero, at the origin story of the Talmud. Because it begins right there in the scene that you described. Most of us, if you're anything like me, rush through these bits in the Passover Seder because we know there's a brisket awaiting. And so we want to read as fast as we humanly can to get to the meat and then maybe call it a night. But when you look at this moment, you see these rabbis and they're sitting there, and it's Elazar and Azariah and Dalton and all these guys are sitting there in Bnei Brak, and they're discussing all night. They're talking, and at some point, you have to wonder if you're even a little bit curious. And again, the Haggadah, like the Talmud, does everything in its power to be impenetrable for reasons that will soon become clear. Who are these guys? What are they talking about? And when you stop to contemplate who they were, you realize that they were men living in the darkest moment in Jewish history ever. Because for 538 years, the temple stood in Jerusalem. In fact, the temple was Judaism. You were Jewish if you went to the temple on the occasions that were prescribed, if you offered the sacrifices like you should do. That was the element, the basis of temple-based Judaism. And if anyone has not read the greatest masterpiece of Hebrew literature in the last 50 years, what is it in English? It's hard for me.
The Ruined House.
The Ruined House. I know it, Abayda Shecharav in Hebrew, Ruby's book, which has a lot to do with temple work. This is Ruby Namda. You should absolutely read it. But the point is that you couldn't be culturally Jewish. Back then you could say, well, I like...
Just to be clear, that's Ruby, the author.
That is the author of the book. Back then you could not say, well, I like bagels and Seinfeld, so I guess I'm Jewish. You had temple life. And then the temple was destroyed. And it's an extinction level event that I think even those of us who have had a very hard time grappling with the aftermath of October 7th need to kind of stop and look at a perspective, because that was a moment in which Jews said, okay, well, what now? For 5 centuries, we did the thing that we no longer physically can do. And then these amazing rabbis, these 5 guys and some other, help, assist from some other geniuses, came up to 2 incredible conclusions. The first is that you could take Judaism and put it all in a book, which, if we're here tonight, I think it is a very appealing idea for a lot of us nerds. Because how often is it that we read a book that feels so much more real and lifelike to us than the reality we happen to be experiencing outside? That alone would have been a great insight, Diana. But then it's a question, okay, well, then how do you do it? If you tasked a minor mind like myself with, okay, well, go ahead and put all Judaism in the book, I would say, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna write down the rules, I suppose. So here's a list of foods that we don't eat. Here's a list of food we totally eat. Here's a list of food we only not eat on 1 week of the year. And this would have been my guide, all the things that we're supposed to do. The rabbis were truly men of great insight into the human psyche, and they understood precisely what human beings would do if you just gave them a list of laws and rules and regulations. They would say, maybe that bit about electricity was really true then, when electricity was, when you had to start a fire and it was a lot of work, and you had to rub sticks together or whatever. But nowadays, it's like a flick of a switch. That doesn't apply to me. Not sure about this rule. I don't like that one. And before you know it, none of these rules are kept. So they came up with a second and even more profound insight, which is instead of writing down rules, they wrote down arguments, which is what this amazing book is. It is a collection of cantankerous Jews screaming at each other. It's like the greatest episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm that goes on for thousands of pages. And my favorite thing to do is when someone would come and say, well, it looks really interesting, what are you learning? And I'd say, I'm learning this issue, and I would share the question, and they would say, oh, it's a really interesting question, what's the answer? I said, the answer? What a profoundly un-Jewish thing to say. We do not care for the answer. And here's the amazing thing, not caring for the answer is actually a deeply philosophical superpower. Look at my beard. I'm old enough to remember that getting fast delivery on the internet meant you got your stuff within a week. Then it was 2 day delivery. Then next day delivery. Then same day delivery. Now we have services that deliver stuff 15 minutes to your door. And I think it's only a matter of time before Amazon basically ships you the things that you want before you buy them, because they know already what you're going to do. And look, it's great. I'm guilty of this convenience addiction as much as the next fellow. But there is something about this fast, shallow, or fast, flat, and facile life that really robs the world of extra layers of truth and beauty. Because the thing that really makes us special and great is that we stop and ask, wait a minute, what is the question about? What is it that we're really asking? What is the essence? Which is something that the Talmud does exceedingly well. So what's in this book? We will soon have an amazing taste, and so I won't spoil any of the pleasures of actually reading and learning with Rabbi Shmully. But the answer is, quite frankly, everything. Because it is a book about humanity, and nothing human is foreign to it. One of my favorite anecdotes, for example, deals very much with the body, which is a subject that occurs repeatedly in the Talmud and really differentiates us from a lot of other religious texts. There's a great story in the Midrash about Rabbi Hillel the Elder. You may remember him from such aphorisms as, if I'm not for myself, etc. Truly the GOAT, greatest of all time. And one day he gets up in the Bet Midrash and he says to his Talmidim, to his students, behold, for I'm now going to do a mitzvah. And the students are blown away. And it's not every day that the master says, I'm going to teach you some new trick. And he gets up and they get up and he walks around and they follow him. And he walks into the bathroom. And disclaimer, this is the Talmud, I'm not being gross. He goes number 2. The students stand outside the door completely stunned. And he comes out, one of them gets the courage to speak and says, Rabbi, said something about a mitzvah, what's going on? And Hillel looks at him and says, do you think that if I had not done what I just did in there, do you think I could stand here before you and teach you Torah? A body that cannot poop cannot pray. And that is such an amazing insight, especially for those of us who try all the time to, get above the body, get out of this, corporeal shell, be holy, be pure, be kind of at one with the universe. Here's the Talmud saying, we're people. We should enjoy everything. There's a reason why my book about the Talmud starts with a fart joke from the Talmud, because it has that, and it's important that it has that. But I want to share one anecdote that I thought was very meaningful, because I knew that we're going to be here today, and I know that the question that seems to be first and foremost on a lot of people's mind is like, okay, well, when it's such a great guide to time, such a great self-help book, we could kind of use some self-help right about that. These are not easy times. Tell us, what does the Talmud have to teach us in the aftermath of October 7th? And there's an amazing account in it, because the Talmud is many things. It is, by the way, preposterous to refer to it as a book. My friend Jonathan Rosen wrote a great book called The Talmud and the Internet. We call it a drift net for catching God, which I think is about as good a definition as I've ever heard. But there's one anecdote in it about another very great rabbi, Yochanan ben Zakkai. He's the leader of the Jewish community in the time of the destruction of the temple. And I'm going to share this anecdote with you because I think it teaches us three really, really important lessons on how to live right now in this moment of profound brokenness. And so the Romans are laying siege to Jerusalem, and through a truly cinematic Indiana Jones-like sequence of events, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai manages to escape. He hides himself in a coffin. He covers himself in rotting material so he smells like a corpse, and there's a lot of action-packed sequences going on. And he manages to come in front of the then Roman general, soon-to-be Roman Emperor Vespasian. And the emperor looks at this wise old man whose reputation is indeed great. And he says, okay, because you are the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, ask me, what is it that you want? Now again, a lesser mind, such as myself, would have said, dude, one thing, please don't destroy Jerusalem. End of story, goodbye. But Yochanan ben Zakkai, thankfully, is smart. He knows that you cannot ask the Roman to not be the Roman. You cannot ask the world to stop turning. And so he asks Vespasian for three things. And there are three things that I think we should really take to heart today. The first thing was this. He says, look, I understand you're going to destroy Jerusalem. Fine. I would like to take a few Torah scholars and move them to the city in central Israel called Yavne, so that we could build the Bet Midrash there and can continue our studies. How many of us these days find ourselves absolutely stricken by what has happened to the schools we used to go to, the political parties we used to support, the newspapers we used to read? Could you believe the New York Times? Oh my God, look at Colombia, there's Hamas and Hezbollah flags. Oh wow, like New York City streets are like violent demonstrations. I don't recognize this place anymore. We have this moment of complete heartbreak because so many of the institutions that used to mean everything to us, in fact, institutions that used to define us, are collapsing. And here's Yochanan ben Zakkai saying, institutions sometimes collapse. In fact, here's Bet HaMikdash. Here's the temple. Here's the physical home of God on earth, and it is breaking down. And you know what? That's fine. Because the thing that we want, it's not the institution. It's the practice. It's not the university, it's the education. It's not the New York Times, it's the journalism. And we can continue to do that. Anyway, let's continue in Yavne, which, for my money, pretty great freaking insight. For that, he was only getting started. The second thing he asked for is, okay, I would like for you to save the family of Rabban Gamliel, Hillel's grandson, kind of the Talmudic Kennedys, the kind of royal family. Because again, Yochanan ben Zakkai was very smart. He knew that if he simply moved the Jews from Jerusalem to Yavne, the Jews would do what we always do, be like, I like the old place better. It had better atmosphere, the food, it's not the same here somehow. It's not the same since they moved, which is what we always do. He understood how important it was to root us in tradition, so that people understand, hey, look, it's the same family. It's the same Rabban Gamliel, whose father was this guy and whose grandfather was this guy. We're doing the same thing. It's the same people keeping the same customs and practices. And this invitation to root ourselves in tradition is so incredibly important, and I find personally has been one of the most meaningful things, if not the most meaningful to me, in not just the aftermath of October 7th, but these last couple of years, which have not been very easy in America. To know that for an hour a day, I'm doing something that would have been completely recognizable to my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is a sense that maybe my great-great-great-great-great-grandson will be okay and will do just the same thing. Again, wow, what a stellar insight. I would have stopped it too. That would have been terrific. But Yochanan ben Zakkai was saving the best for last, because he looked at Vespasian and said, one more thing. I want you to send a doctor to my friend Rabbi Tzadok. He's old, He's very upset about this business with the temple. He stopped eating. He's very sick. And you could look at it and say, are you for real? The city is under siege. War's coming. There are going to be hundreds of thousands of people dead very soon. And you care about some old dude who's sad and doesn't eat? Like, what's wrong with you? But that, I think, is the greatest teaching of all. How many of us wake up every morning and say, we have to save Israel. We have to save America. We have to save the Democratic Party. We have to save the Republican Party. We have to save Columbia University. We have to save the Jews. But Yochanan ben Zakkai is telling us, stop. It's not your job to save the Jews, or to save Israel, or to save the Democrats or the Republicans or anything. It is your job to look across the street, find one old guy who's not doing very well, and say, you know what? How are you today? Can I offer you some support? Can I send a doctor? Can I give you some soup? Can I be there for you? Because as this great book of ours teaches us, if you save one soul in Israel, it's as if you saved the world in time. And I want to conclude my remarks and pass it over to Rabbi Shmully, but I'm contractually obligated to tell a Hasidic story whenever I speak. It's not negotiable, and it's going to happen right now. It's obviously not a Talmudic story, but it's a story that I think captures the spirit of the Talmud better than any I've ever heard. And it's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. So one day, the richest man in town walks into the Baal Shem Tov's office, sits down in the chair, puts his muddy boots on the Baal Shem Tov's table, and says, Rabbi, do you know the prophet Elijah? Baal Shem Tov says, I believe I'm familiar with his work, yes. The rich guy says, great, so here's the deal. Every Passover, there comes a point in the Seder where we open the door and we leave a cup of wine, and supposedly the prophet Elijah comes into every Jewish home in the Seder. But here's the thing. I've never met the guy, and I have money, and I'm interested. Can you arrange a meeting? Baal Shem Tov says, sure. The rich guy says, really? Baal Shem Tov says, no problem. Takes out a piece of paper, writes down an address, gives it to the guy, says, be there tonight, 7 o'clock. The guy says, that's it? Baal Shem Tov says, yeah, but you know, it's the prophet Elijah, kind of a big deal in the Bible, so stop at the Whole Foods, get some chicken, some pie, some fruit, like make it nice for the prophet, you know? Rich guy says, no problem. Goes shopping, takes heavy bags, walks around, he looks at the address, and he's a little bit surprised because the address is not in the nicest part of town. He's like, whatever, Baal Shem Tov said so, it must be true. Knocks on the door of this small building, and this woman opens the door, and she looks, tired. She has 4 kids. Guy walks in and sits down at 7, 7:30, 7:45, and 8, and nothing happens. He says, must have been some misunderstanding, but I'm already here. I already, have this food. Let's just eat. Worry about it later. The next morning, he goes back to the Baal Shem Tov's office. He says, Rabbi, what's the deal? I came to the address you gave me. No prophet Elijah. Baal Shem Tov says, oh, I'm sorry. There's been some misunderstanding. Here. Writes down another address. Rich guy's like, are you sure about this? Baal Shem Tov's like, yeah, don't worry, 7 p.m. tonight. Rich guy gets up to leave. Baal Shem Tov says, don't forget the Whole Foods. Rich guy says, I got you. Goes, shops, chicken, pie, the whole thing. And he's walking, and this time the address is in an even less well-to-do part of town. And this time the house is even smaller. And this time the woman who opens the door looks even more tired, and she has 6 kids. And again the guy sits and waits, and again at 7, 7:30, and 8, and again nothing happens. And again he says, well, might as well just eat the food. And again he goes home. The 3rd morning, he storms into the Baal Shem Tov's office, slams his fist on the table and says, do not mess with me. I'm a very rich, influential person. I'm asking you a yes or no question. Can I meet the prophet Elijah tonight? The Baal Shem Tov says, tonight. The guy says, okay. He gets up to leave before the Baal Shem Tov even has a chance to say it. He says, yeah, I know, the whole food, the chicken, the thing. Again, he goes shopping, takes the address that the Baal Shem Tov gave him, starts walking, and this time it's in the absolute poorest part of town. And this time, the house isn't even a house. It's just a hut. Barely has a door. The man is about to knock on the door, but then he thinks, what am I, stupid? Prophet Elijah's not going to come. It's going to be the same thing. The Baal Shem Tov probably hates me because, I'm not a learned rabbi like he is. He's probably just messing with me. I'm just going to go home. This is a waste of time. And as he's turning away, he hears a voice coming from inside the house. And it's a small girl crying. And he says, Mommy, I'm so hungry. We haven't had anything to eat in 2 days. And the mother says, don't worry, my love. The Baal Shem Tov promised me that any minute now, there'll be a knock on this door, and the prophet Elijah will bring us dinner. And this is the answer to what we should be doing right now. We should be knocking on every door, but not before we study some Talmud.
and that is why they hate us. Everything that you just said is the reason why they hate us. And the more we do, the more envious they are going to be. But if we stick to where we are going, we will see the third temple in our lifetime. If you look at the things that have actually happened here, and you look beyond the drama and the things that we're sick about, think about the miracles that are taking place every day in the unity of our people. The disunity is damaging the unity of our people. When have you seen an untested international alliance of former enemies, an untested military technology work 100%? You saw that several weeks ago in the attack from Iran. The president of Iran's airplane slams into the side of a mountain. Maybe the IDF was involved in that? I don't think so. Okay, nobody wants to see anybody die, but the disruption, the things that are happening that are outside of our control, I believe we're living in times of redemption. But let me just, before I turn it over to Shmully, to bring this down so you guys really understand and read this book. This is not a book, a lecture about the Talmud. Shmully's going to talk to us, I'm sure, more formally and rabbinically about what is the Talmud and how would we interpret the Talmud. But let me just read you the context of this book, because you may not open it otherwise, okay? The introduction says how and why to read the Talmud. Okay, that's what you would expect. Chapter 1, our bodies, our cells, or having a snack, taking a bath, and pooping can save your soul. We talked about that. Chapter 2, all together now, or how to play well with others. Chapter 3, holding out for a hero, or how to be yourself. Chapter 4, romance in the dark, or how to win in love and marriage. Chapter 5, everything in order, how to make sense of the world. Chapter 6, thank you for being a friend, or how fighting can bring you closer, like me and Alana today, okay? Chapter 7, the stories we tell, or how to find your voice. This is what's in this book. I haven't read it, but I promise you, I'm going to read it, and it's going to be really interesting. And I, without even reading it, just knowing the man a little bit and following his thinking for a while, this book is going to be worth your while to read this summer. Okay.
Okay. So again, thank you. In light of this being a discussion about Talmud, I thought I'd open up with critiquing Liel's opening remarks.
Fantastic.
And I'm going to respect everyone's time. We call this till 9, and Liel was kind enough to be here tonight on a night that he actually has to fly to Rome this evening, so he has a departure.
I'm going to retrieve some objects that the Vatican may or may not have taken from said temple. Just
nice. And so I may speak a little bit quickly. and it's unfair to critique someone and not give them an opportunity to have a rebuttal. So we're gonna have to do this weekly at your home. And next time you come back,
You're
meet
welcome,
everybody.
Anthony.
And I'll start with the caveat that I'm not sure that what Liel said is actually what he meant or what was perhaps inferred by his remarks about the question is what's important, not necessarily the answers. And we can argue about how specific you meant about that. But I would
The search for the answers.
yeah, and so the search for the answer. So how important, what's the answer? And well, do we negate that question to begin with? Of course,
By the way,
Liel.
we do have the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
And we have halakha, so of course the answer is going to matter. At some
So
point.
of course
Some of us.
Liel agrees that we're all in search of the answers, and that's why we study Talmud. The reason the Talmud is so important then is because the only way to actually find the answer to anything is to argue. Because if you don't argue about something, you make a lot of assumptions, and so you can read a ruling. But if you haven't read both sides, and specifically the dissenting opinion on that particular ruling, you don't really have an answer. You have a very vague, peripheral, almost superficial ruling. You can only indulge into the depth of the answer or the ruling or the law on anything by understanding all the arguments that went into it and the intricacies of those arguments, and then the answer shines. And that is perhaps why the Talmud is so important. The Shulchan Aruch, as you mentioned, is the Code of Jewish Law, which was written later in the 1500s and the 1600s, 1,000 years after the Talmud. The Talmud is really the bread and butter of the argument. And as Jews, who are people of the law, people of the land, but we are people of the law, we are very good at I'm sitting next to a Harvard Law School alum and so many Yale Law School people here, that we know that law can only rise and can only shine and enlighten us when we understand what stands behind the law and the arguments that go into it. And that's what the Talmud is. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that thank you, obviously, Liel, for writing the book. I think it's so critical that we have something like this that we can give to people. But I think considering the mature intellectual level of the people that are sitting in this room, I think we have to go a little further. So we can read Liel's book, which is so critical for the masses, I would say. But to write a book like that, you have to actually study Talmud. And for those of you who are going to pick up the book and read it, you can't stop with a book like this. And Liel will tell you that. You have to become Liel. You have to become a master of the Talmud. And to become a master of the Talmud means that when you're done with that, you go into the intricacies and the complexity of studying Talmud. Now, for most of us, it's very difficult.
So you can't even do the shortcut of reading the Rambam's Mishnah Torah.
You should read the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, but you want to know how the Rambam wrote the Mishnah Torah.
Right.
And so to understand how the Rambam wrote the Mishnah Torah, which is the Rambam was a 12th century who compiled his set of laws, 14 books, and he said that after you read the Bible, you can skip the Talmud essentially and read the Rambam. But the Rambam was kind. Liel's kind. I'm not very kind. I'm gonna
go to the source.
Yeah, I'm gonna push a little bit, and I know Liel's with me on this journey, and it's about Talmud. Now, when you study Talmud, first of all, I want you to know that in most seminaries, you sit across from a partner. And I'll open up. I don't want to tell stories outside of the Talmud story, but I'm reminded of something that Stephen Greenblatt, the great Shakespeare professor at Harvard, said, recorded. I'll paraphrase. Was that he was taken to, he was on a tour of Israel, and Moshe Havertal, one of the great Jewish philosophers who actually wrote the Code of Ethics for the IDF, and he teaches at NYU Law School, and he's a philosopher and teaches at Yale Law School, schlepped the great Stephen Greenblatt, who has written so many books on Shakespeare, at midnight to a Talmudic seminary in the heart of Jerusalem. It must have been the Mir Yeshiva. Mir Yeshiva is a big building with 1,000 students who study Talmud. Men in their ages 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, even into older years. And what they do is they open up the text. And we pour over the Talmud and we argue and the dialectic, the debate, the discussion. And Stephen Greenblatt says, and this is going back at least 20 years because the recording is in 2001, so 24 years, it was prior to that, that he, who had gone to, I believe, Berkeley and Yale, and now is tenured at Harvard and a university professor, and it doesn't get much better than that in the academic world. Has published so many fantastic books, and I believe has tens of millions of views of his Shakespeare classes at Harvard online, said that he walked into this room of 1,000 young men poring over this, thousands of pages of this, a page of the Talmud, of which Liel introduced us to in his book. And he said it was the greatest intellectual experience of his life. 24 years later, I was lucky enough to, with Toby and the Shabtai community in Boston, to have an event with Stephen Greenblatt where he spoke about anti-Semitism in Shakespeare and Shylock and The Merchant of Venice, and we had a discussion, and I handed him, I said, you write about literature. There are two parts of the Talmud. There is the literature of the Talmud, which you speak about, and then there are the arguments, the legal discussions that go on in the Talmud. They're very different. As I said, Liel's kind. He'll throw you Talmudic stories and with implications, of course, morals and how we deal with anything in any event in history. And those stories are very, very deep. And then there's obviously the more intricate, mind-boggling arguments of the Talmud, which the great legal scholars and rabbis and students, frankly, delve into. But I said to Stephen Greenblatt, being that you are a great literature, a man of literature, there was a man in the same time as Shakespeare, actually, in the 1500s, who took all the stories in the Talmud and culled them from the 2,000 plus pages, compiled just the stories, just the literature, just the parables, just the allegorical narratives, just the poetry, and said to the person who wasn't ready yet for the complex argumentative part of the Talmud, the discourse and the legal arguments, called it a book called Ayin Yaakov and published it so that people who couldn't access the more intricate parts of the Talmud could study at least the literature and start with that. And for hundreds of years now, Jews around the world study the Ayin Yaakov. And so I gifted Stephen Greenblatt the first volume of the book of Ayin Yaakov, a book which was about 500 pages long. And that story is, that speech that I gave, and I connected it to his name because he happened to have the same name as the author of the Ayin Yaakov, together with his father's name. But here's what's not on the internet. What's not on the internet is that for weeks, Stephen Greenblatt would email me the things he was reading and how fascinated he was. And then after a few months, he said, Shmully, I'm done with volume 1. And I thought that was really fascinating. This is a man who's probably read, just about everything. But he found it important to read the Ayin Yaakov, to read the stories of the Talmud, and loves it. And I just went out and bought volume 2, and I'm going to send it to him. And my message with that to all of us in the room is that start a Talmud class, join a Talmud class, get online and download a Talmud class. It is the most intellectual experience.
Listen to our Daf Yomi podcast.
Oh, listen to Daf Yomi.
6 minutes every day of pretty accessible introduction to whatever page you're reading.
Thank you. On Talmud's website.
But this is why. For those, if you haven't been exposed to it, this explains what use it is to you.
The second anecdote that I should mention before I move to the actual Talmud is that during COVID, Toby and I were taking a walk in the summertime through New Haven, in the town. It was a ghost town. We bumped into Peter Salve, the president of Yale, and we stopped to talk. And we started to chat about everything and anything. There was nobody around. It was the president and the rabbi. And so, great conspiracy. I know. Next, what are we doing? And we talked, and he says, I have to show you something. I have to show you something on my phone, Shmully. And I said, Peter, he's Jewish. I said, Peter, you can't turn your phone on. It's Shabbos. And he says, well, how much time do we have? And we looked up at the sky, and I said, we've got some time. And I said, well, how are you going to know what time? I don't have a watch on Shabbos. And he said, I can't turn my phone on. How am I going to know when Shabbos is out? And I said, well, 3 stars in the sky is night, according to the Talmud. And so when the 3 stars come out, you'll be able to turn your phone on and show me what you want to show me. So we talked about everything from Hemingway to bullfighting in Spain to kosher caterers to the future of New Haven and Yale and what the next semester was going to look like. And there we were, and Toby at some point had to get back to the kids, and she said, I'm going to go and leave it to you guys. And then 3 stars appeared in the sky, and he turns his phone on, and he says, I want you to know that I study Talmud every day. And he pointed to, I believe, I don't know what this is, but there must be somebody who puts out a 1-page summary every day of the daf. So the daf being the page of the Talmud. If you want to finish the Talmud, you can do it in 7+ years by studying one page a day. And people do this around the world. And you talk about it in the book, the tens of thousands of people that come to the big stadiums. So here you have the great Shakespeare professor at Harvard and the great president of Yale University and so many like them that are actually delving in and reading the original text. So with that, I'll open by saying this is what a page of Talmud looks like. It's a 5th century. It's based on the Mishnah, which is the 2nd century. There are various tractates, 63. This is the tractate of Shabbos. And
Which Talmud is that?
so this is the Babylonian Talmud, which is generally what we study. This is where most of the arguments are. The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, is a little bit more definitive. This is much more argumentative. The center of the page is the actual text of the Talmud. It's written in an Aramaic, which was the language of that time. This was 5th century Iraq, modern day Iraq. And on the side you have Rashi, who's the 11th century, and he's French. And he understands that most people in France in the 11th century don't read Aramaic, just like we don't read Aramaic. And so, some of us. And so he translates it into a modern Hebrew and an Old French. At times he'll bring down the Old French. Now when we in Yeshiva study the Rashi and we don't understand the Old French, we open up the back of the Talmud and we'll find a translation of the Old French to Yiddish, and then from Yiddish to English. So you start off, and then in the Talmud, you are actually often going to have quotes, because everything in the Talmud is based on the Bible, which is the Old Testament, which is Hebrew. And so you're starting off with Hebrew, you're moving to Aramaic, you're going to French, to modern Hebrew, to Old French, to Yiddish, to English. And so the average guy that you see in Yeshiva, or the guy with the black hat who's sitting outside the Vatican with his payas and his beard, is mastering 5 to 7 languages at the age of 13 years old. At the age of 13 years old, he's studying, some even earlier, he's studying 5 to 6 languages, most of which are not spoken today in the Western world. People don't speak Aramaic. A different form of Hebrew, an Old French, and then a Yiddish, and then back to an English. That's the inside of the page. Rashi, on the outside of every page of Talmud, you'll find Tosfos, and they are commentaries that lived through the 11th, 12th, 13th century, and they argue with Rashi. Rashi, you read the Talmud and translated so, and I want to argue that the translation of the Talmud is different, or there's another place in the Talmud where there seems to be something that contradicts what we just read, and so he argues. And then on the side, we have footnotes, indexes, bibliographies, where they are telling us where we will find the summary of the ruling of this argument that they're arguing about in the Code of Jewish Law. Because, as Liel says, we have the questions, we have the answers, we have the argument, we have the dissenting opinions, but how do you actually practice? And that's going on over here, and then the same on the side, you'll have other texts. There were censors in different periods of history. Christians didn't allow us to publish the Talmud exactly a certain way, and so there's different texts that come up, Bodleian and different libraries at Oxford, etc. And so you'll find different footnotes and guidance as to where to find things in later
Long
centuries.
before Silicon Valley gave us hyperlinks, here they are on this amazing page, teaching you to think in this connected way.
And going from the story to the law, so I think today we should introduce everybody to one piece of each, and I'll try to do it as fast as I can. I think it would actually be better if we did it together. So why don't you pass these around? Okay. And we'll start, of course, with the story. And we are on page, top right of the page of Talmud. How many in this room read Hebrew? Anybody in this room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have about 5 out of 25, 20% of us read in actual Hebrew. You ever read? So, what does it say? Amir,
Yes.
what does it say? There's 2 letters on the top right side of the Hebrew page. I'm on page 1. What does that say? Pach. So, and 2 dots. Pach and 2 dots. Everybody see that? So on the top right side, right here, you see pach. And do you know what that means? You know what that is? What?
Basket.
A basket. So he thinks it's a basket. Pach. Pach. Could.
In modern Hebrew, tin.
Tin. Thank you. Tin, a basket. Thank you very much. It's neither. So it could mean, it's translated as tin or a basket, but what those 2 letters actually are telling us what page we're on. Every letter has a numerical value in the Hebrew alphabet. Pei is 80, Ches is 8. We're on page 88. Why 2 dots? What? Did I lose you already? We haven't even started.
Why not?
2 dots because we're on side B. So if you were every page of Talmud is, the pagination is side 1 of the page, side 2 of the page. We're on page 88. 2 dots means side 2. And we turn to the next page, and on the top left, you will see pay test. Pay test means we are now 89. 1 dot. Why is it 1 dot? Because we're on side 1. Now, we only have 5 Hebrew readers here, so we're going to move to the English. As much as I would absolutely love to read this for you in Hebrew, I'll actually read just the first paragraph in Hebrew, because you have to invoke the sacred language, the holy tongue of the great sages. I'm on the bottom of Pach 2, page 88-2. The Talmud says as follows: V'amar Rabbi Shmully Levi, v'shasha alam Moshe l'marim, amru malach Hashem l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rebbeinu Shalom, Mali Yeludish Benina. Rabbi Shmully Levi said, and this is the story part of the Talmud that we're going to do tonight. When Moses went up to heaven, he said to the angels, the angels turned to God, and they said to God, he went up to receive the Torah. Moses goes up to God to receive the Torah. And the sages say, the angels say to God, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, Mali Yeludish Beninu, what is a mortal doing here in heaven? Marlene the Chabad Rabbi, and the God says he came to receive the Torah. Amru Lefanav, and the angels now start to argue with God. So this is an argument between 3 parties: the Lord, the angels, and Moses. And what is the argument? So go.
What page are we on?
We're going to turn to page 88b, which is what we're reading. We're going to do it in English. Yeah, now it's a little bit, I cut and pasted this today, I'm sorry. So the numbers are footnotes, there's no footnotes, so skip the numbers and just read as best as you can. When Moses ascended on high.
When Moses ascended on high, the ministering angels spake before the Holy One, blessed be he, saying, Sovereign of the universe, what business has one born of woman amongst us? He has come to receive the Torah, they answered he to them. Said they to him, that secret treasure, which has been hidden by thee for 974 generations before the world was created. Can we keep going?
Yeah.
Thou desirest to give to flesh and blood. What is man, that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man, that thou visiteth him? O Lord our God, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who has set thy glory, the Torah, upon the heavens.
Stop. The angels want to know, why are you giving the Torah to man? The angels claim we should get the Torah. The Torah is great intellectual, spiritual, transcendental wisdom, genius of the Lord. It should go to the angels. Okay? Return them an answer. Whoever's reading? Yeah, so we're going to read.
Sorry, I lost this one.
31.
Return them an answer.
Return them an answer, bade the Holy One, blessed be he to Moses. Sovereign of the universe, replied he, I fear lest they consume me with the fiery breath of their mouths. Hold on to the throne of glory, said he to him, and return them an answer. As it is said, he maketh him to hold on to the face of his throne, and spreadeth his cloud over him. Whereon
Rabbi Nachman. Just skip the number, sorry. Yeah.
Observed. This teaches the Almighty.
You can skip the parentheses.
This teaches the Almighty spread the luster of his
Shekhinah. That's
Shekhinah,
the omnipresence.
and cast it as a protection over him. He then spake before him, Sovereign of the universe, the Torah which thou givest me, what is written therein? I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Said he to them, the angels, Did ye go down to Egypt, where ye enslaved to Pharaoh? Why then should the Torah be yours?
Stop. So he turns to Moses. God is being challenged by the angels as to why the Torah goes to mankind and not to the angels. And God turns to Moses and he says, Moses, give them an answer. And Moses says, well, let's look at what the Torah says. I got a manual here for a fridge. If you don't own the fridge, right? You don't have the manual. So this is a manual for questions like it says, I'm the Lord thy God who brought you out of Egypt. Well, to the angels, did you go to Egypt? Did God take you out of Egypt? No, you didn't. So why should you get the Torah? But let's move on. Pass it around. Again, what is written 2 lines before the end of the first paragraph?
Again, what is written therein? Thou shalt have none other gods. 37.
We're going to skip numbers.
Okay. Do ye dwell among peoples that engage in?
Idol worship, yeah, we're gonna skip, that's the next page, we're on 89A now.
Idol worship, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Idol worship. Again, what is written therein? Remember that the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Do ye then perform work what ye need to rest? Again, what is written therein? Thou shalt not take Tisa, the name of the vain. Is there any business, Nasa, dealings among you? Again, what is written therein, honor thy father and mother. Have ye fathers and mothers? Again, what is written therein, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not steal. Is there jealousy among you? Is there evil among you?
Stop. So, Moses basically responds to God, to the angels, that everything that the Torah tells us to do or not to do is totally irrelevant to our world of angels. It's only relevant to mankind. Hence, the Torah has to descend from heaven to earth.
No, that's a lawyer.
That's a Alexa. Yeah. Straightway.
Straightway they conceded to the Holy One, blessed be He, for it is said, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name, etc. Whereas, who has set thy glory upon the heavens is not written. Immediately each one was moved to love him, and transmitted something to him. For it is said, Thou hast ascended on high, thou hast spoken spoils, thou hast received the gifts on account of man. As recompense for their calling thee man, thou didst receive gifts. The angel of death too confided his secret to him, for it is said, and he put on the incense, and made atonement for the people. And it is said, and he stood between the dead and the living. Had he not told to him, whence had he known it myself? Said the Holy One, blessed be he, to Moses. Moses, since thou hast disparaged thyself, it shall be called by thy name. As it is said, remember ye the law of Moses my servant.
So the Torah is called Torah, Zikr Torah Moshe Avdi, remember the Torah of Moshe. Moshe is called Adam. He disparages himself by accepting that he's not quite an angel. He is just man. He represents mankind. And he says to the Creator that the wisdom, the intellect, the genius, the rules, the laws, do not pertain to heavenly bodies. They don't pertain to angelic universes. They pertain very specifically to here. As Liel said, the last thing was go out and feed the old man across the street, Rabbi Tzadok, who's dying at the time of the destruction of the temple. And if we lose that, we've forgotten it all. The big mega questions are answered by literally going across the street and helping that person. So that's the first page of Talmud, and that's a story. And it's a story about Moses receiving the Torah and arguing for it. Now, there's another tractate in Talmud called Bava Metzia. Bava Metzia. Here, if we look at the next page, on the top right-hand corner, and just hope, you've got to concentrate now because we're going to move a little faster. Kuf Ches. Kuf Ches is 108. 108, 2 dots. We're on 108.2. Okay, let's talk real estate for a minute. Real estate development. The number one deal in real estate, the smart guys in the real estate are the assemblers. What does it mean to assemble? Larry Wall, good friend of mine, lives in Manhattan, dad had a real estate business. Bought up townhouses on 2nd Avenue. Took him 25 years, townhouse after townhouse after townhouse. And then the bank comes along and says, you know, Mr. Wall, you own all of 2nd Avenue between 40th and 41st. I'm not sure exactly where the building is, on 41st and 42nd. Why don't we tear the brownstones down and put up a tower? And we'll give you the money, the bank will give you the money to finance the tower. And lo and behold, they go and they build a 40-story Class A office building. So the assemblage is very important, right? The corner property is always very important. And the assemblage is important because the sum of the parts of the assemblage, right, is often worth more. The whole is worth more than the sum of its parts. Buildable square footage, right? How many square feet can you build based on the floor plate? So you have an acre piece of land, and the zoning says acre is 42,000 square feet, and you've got an acre of land, and the zoning says 100 feet per square foot, right? 100 square feet as you can go up. So can you go up 50 stories? Can you go 100 stories? Well, logic tells you the wider the piece of land, the bigger you can go. Different towns have different zoning. Toby and I were just in Charleston, South Carolina. Fascinating. They preserved the entire city. The skyscraper is 6 stories high because the people in Charleston love their city. 17th, 18th, and 19th century architecture. It's the greatest piece of America. For those of you who haven't been, you should go. And the genius is that nothing is built up. Then you come to New York, or you go to Hong Kong, or you go to the Middle East today, and to so many cities around the world, and they're building buildings in 1,500 years. Talmud comes along, and the Talmud says that there's an interesting verse in the Bible that says, "V'asisa hayashar v'atayv be'enei Hashem." V'asisa, you shall do hayashar, the righteous thing, v'atayv, and the good thing, be'enei Hashem, in the eyes of God. Now the Bible could have said, "V'asisa hayashar v'atayv," do the good thing. Do the good thing. Be a good man. Be kind, like Liel. Like Dan, like Marlene, like all of us, right? What's be'enei Hashem in the eyes of God? So the Talmud says that if you own a piece of land, 57th and 5th, and you want to sell it, and I live in Chicago, and I want to buy it, and so I come along and I buy your land, and you own the land next door, and you have the right to force me to avoid the purchase, and if I buy it, you can actually force me to sell it back to you. You'd have to give me back my money. You'd have to refund me my money. But you have the right to that land. Why do you have the right to that land? It's a free market. We're capitalists. Price is price. I'm from Chicago. I'm Sam Zell. I started buying New York. I want to put up a tower. And you're some developer in New York City, won't mention any names, and you say, no, I own a piece of land next door. So in the free market in New York City, it's price rules. The Jew is taught in the Bible that when we are doing business with each other, don't buy that piece of land. The prohibition is not on the seller of you not to sell me the piece of land and to call you. I am prohibited from buying the land. Because by buying that land, think about this, I am going to potentially, theoretically, hurt you because you own a piece of land, and I have to at least give you a chance first to look at it, to know about it, and to buy it. That derivative from the verse, "V'asisa hayashar v'atayv be'enei Hashem," you should do the righteous thing in the eyes of God, is called, in Talmudic terms, the law of bar metzar, the law of the neighbor, the law of the one who has who is the adjacent property. It's the law of the adjacent. The adjacent property owner has the right to the land first, simply because the enhancement of his investment is greater by virtue of the scale of having that piece of land.
My God, I wish
We're in big
we
trouble.
knew that when we tried to buy that building next door.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And our friend, who's now our friend, bought it and wouldn't let us buy it.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So,
It's exactly.
Toby, now wait, we're starting. I'm only going to go 5 more minutes because I want you to close. But here's the problem. Here's the problem with this. So 2 things I should say. It's funny you say that because when we moved to New Haven and we bought a brownstone for Shabtai, we were very, very lucky. It was in the mid-90s, and we assembled a few brownstones. This is our old building, and we missed the corner for $225,000. I mean, it's unbelievable. And Toby and I always say, oh my God, can you imagine? It's all these years later, we never got the corner. It would have been great just for Shabtai as an endowment. And I say, you know what, when we need it, we're not building anyway, but the point is, there's always that sort of regret. Now, there are exceptions to this rule of the bar mitzvah. And you can spend I would say you can spend at least 6 months to a year studying this page of Talmud. I'm not exaggerating. Go into any Davis Paul Weiss, Wachtel, and sit down with a real estate lawyer who does zoning law and development law and financing and municipal law. Go into any city plan person in any city in America today and start talking to them about what I'm talking about and study this piece of Talmud with them. I assure you, I don't want to make a promise, you'll blow their minds. Because the intricacies of this law get very complex. So I want to introduce you very quickly to the exceptions to the bar mitzvah. Now, you talked about the property next door. This law is very specific to agriculture. in agriculture, if my cow has to walk 50 feet, if my bull has to pull the yoke 50 feet, right, to plow the field, and I can pick up another 50 feet, right? It does a lot for me versus me having to buy 50 feet here and then get my bull on the back of a wagon, move him to the other side of town, and to make him plow another piece of field. So the extension here that we're talking about, the scale that we're talking, generally speaking, when it comes to the bar mitzvah, is not actually residential development. It's not even actually commercial development. It's more specific to the laws of agriculture, because in the laws of agriculture, the scale, especially in ancient times, but even today, we drove across Oregon from tens of miles, and you see what scale does, right? With irrigation, with transportation. I stopped. I said to the cop, I said, who is buying all this corn? He said, the Chinese. They're moving it from Oregon to the coast, putting it on ships, and it's going to China. We're literally feeding the Chinese with our corn. So the location, the scale for the water system, the irrigation systems, etc., because weather patterns, of course, are very specific to where you are, and location, etc. Okay, I'm going to have to do this because if we do it around the table, it may get a little bit complicated, so I'm just going to go through it real quick. We're on page 108b. We are now in another tractate of Talmud, and then I'm going to try to connect the two pieces, and then I'm going to stop. A gift is not subject to the law of preemption. So if I'm gifting you the land, the neighbor has no right to it. Said a neighbor, but if the donor promised security of tenure, it is subject thereto. Okay? I don't want to kill your night. I'm just going to give you a little bit of Talmud here. If I give you the land as I'm supposed to sell it, the guy next door can't say he has a right to it. I can give a gift to whoever I want. If I'm selling it, your $50 and his $50 is the same $50. So take it from the guy who lives next door, because it's equal sum. But if I'm gifting it, you can't stop me from giving a gift. If I give you a gift, however, and I put a subject security of tenure means that I'm actually guaranteeing the gift. It's not going to be clawed back by a prior owner to the gift, which means it's totally guaranteed. Then it's like a sale, somewhat like a sale, and therefore there's an exception. When one sells all his property to one person, the law of preemption does not apply. I have a portfolio of real estate all over Manhattan. I want to sell it to one guy versus breaking it up, because one guy's going to pay more if he buys the whole portfolio. Then the law of the bar mitzvah doesn't apply. It doesn't apply because this guy's going to come along and say, I want that piece next door to you. Well, dude, I'm not just selling this little piece of land. I'm selling 50 pieces of land, and that guy's buying the whole 50. You just want to buy one. I don't want to take it out of the portfolio. He wants all or nothing, exempt. Next. Likewise, if it's sold to its original owner, it is not subject to the law of preemption. I own a piece of property next door. I want to sell it to its original owner. I'm redeeming the land, giving it back to the original owner. The neighbor wants it. The neighbor doesn't have a right to request it because I'm doing something which is also Taiv Yashar, really kind. I'm giving the original owner, whose grandfather lived in that house, I want it back, give it to him. Okay, if one purchase from one sales to a heathen, there is no law of preemption. He translated as heathen, the actual word in the Talmud is akum, which is avedis kachavim u'mazalas, idol worshippers. We separated ourselves from idol worshippers, and idol worshippers are they are not obligated to follow our law. We don't have to be kind to the idol worshipper. In fact, the idol worshipper may be a problem. I know in our neighborhood, you think very carefully about the people that you live next door to, okay? And if the guy's worshiping idols and you don't want your kid, having a voodoo thing outside your house, so you can make an exception to that. If one purchases from a heathen, because the purchaser can say to him, to a budding neighbor, I have driven a line away from your boundaries. I'm actually going to stop the idol worshiper from being in the neighborhood, and so it's exempt. If he sells to a heathen, because the heathen is certainly not subject to the exhortation, and you can't obligate a idol worshiper or a heathen from following the Bible. It's not his Bible, it's a law between Jews. Nevertheless, the vendor is placed under a ban until he accepts responsibility for any injury that might ensue to the heathen. A mortgage is not subject to the law of preemption. I have collateral, and the lender wants to come along and say, I want to pull that collateral, I want to pull the collateral and sell it because you didn't pay your loan back, right? I don't have to give it to the neighbor because I'm in a tight situation. I'm trying to collect the loan, etc., etc. Okay, I'll stop there. And I'll end by saying this. The law of the bar mitzvah continues, and it gets very, very complicated. The commentaries say that the reason why God didn't give the Bible, the reason that the angels had a claim on the Bible was because they were the neighbor. They were closer. They were spiritual. And they said, before you go and give it to the mortal down on earth, before you give the law to human beings, we have the first right. We have the first right. And that's what the commentaries explain. And the commentaries, so they connect these two pieces of Talmud, a story about the angels arguing with God and Moses about who should get the Bible, and this law about the budding neighbor. That's right. Yeah, it's the Gemara. And so it's like, oh, so you're the neighbor, and so you have the right to it. And God says, no, I'm going to give it to human beings. People need law. People need structure. People need do, don't. As Toby says, people need values. We don't have any values today. People need right and wrong. We need to frame our lives. Each one can define that for ourselves. What is the exemption here? Why did God give it ultimately to mankind? So one of the exemptions, and this is something that the late Rebbe teaches us. One of the exemptions is that if I own the land, Daniel, and I want to sell it to somebody who wants to build a home, and I have somebody else who wants to have a farm, the guys from Oklahoma who shows up in New Haven and wants to have a home is more important than your agricultural business, because the home is primary. God says to Moses, respond to the angels. The response is that God wants a home. A dir b'tachtenim, what we refer to in Hasidic terminology, starting from a medrash. God wants a home. For God to be in a home, there has to be good and there has to be bad. There has to be do and there has to be don't. There has to be temptation and there has to be all the things that we enjoy in life. The essence of God, the essence of bringing this divine spirit into our lives. How do you make a home for God? A home is the place that you are yourself. Where is the essence of godliness manifested? In a very physical, mundane world where don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, be good to your wife, be good to your children, be good to your neighbors, visit the sick, bury the dead. That is the essence of God. Going to Rabbi Tzaddik and giving a hungry man that third part of the story that Liel recited, the Talmudic story, is the essence of God. God is not some spiritual, foreign monk in a monastery. That's not the Jewish God. The Jewish God is the way we do business. It's the way we live our lives. It's the way we have sex. It's the way we behave with our friends. It's the way we eat. It's the way we sleep. It's the way we walk around. And it's the way we behave as civil people in a universe. And when we do the right thing, and we don't do the wrong thing, and we live a higher form of existence, we are creating the home for God. The angel can't do it. The angel can't do it. It doesn't have the challenges, and doesn't have the difficulties and the perplexities. An angel was created, it has a mission, it does its mission, it comes back. Whether it's a good angel or a bad angel. The human being has free choice, and the human being, that free choice is the divine spirit that is in us. Only God has free choice, and only the human being has free choice. Animals don't have it, and plants don't have it, and inanimate things in the world definitely don't have it. So the free choice of the human being, and the free choice of God is our divinity. It is how we connect with the divine. It is how we make the world a great place. It is the way we create a dwelling place for God. So God says, I'm going to give the law specifically to mankind, not to the angel, because that is how a home is going to be built. And so they are actually closer to the divine. We are closer to the divine than the angels, and that's why we have our first right on it. So my suggestion tonight is that we not only think Talmudically, to think Talmudically and to be a really smart ass and to be a genius and to know all the arguments and to be able to quote and to be able to think, we know what that's doing to the world. Like, as you mentioned before, the universities are crumbling. They're so smart. They're so smart. Look, they're so smart, these guys with tenure. They're so smart. Maybe they need a little wisdom. Maybe all those double Ph.D. tenured people running our universities need a little wisdom. And the same thing with our politicians. When I say our, I mean our American politicians, our leaders in this country, our leaders in Israel. We need wisdom. And we need not just to be so smart, but to actually live the Talmud. And if we live the Talmud, we are going to live a greater form. It starts with learning, because educated, informed people like to understand. We have to argue, and we have to call over every little page of the Talmud, every line of the Talmud, and work through it so that we can distill the essence of what the law is and really understand the other perspective, as you said, the other person's perspective, the courage that we need to understand somebody disagrees with us, and then live in our highest form, not just by being Talmudic in the way we think, but by actually living it. And that's my blessing to all of us, that your home should be blessed. It should always be a place where people kibitz and even argue in a healthy way, in a spiritual way, in a divine way, the way you and I argue, and Liel, the way you and I kibitz and laugh, and hopefully we'll continue to argue in a sacred form, and then take the result, the ramification of that argument, and bring it into our lives in the way we practice it, that we live a higher form of living. And that's my thought for the night. So thank you everybody for sharing this talk.
We have 13 minutes of Liel's time left.
I am so sorry.
How about hearing from some other people? I mean, people have questions for Liel or Rabbi. I mean, I have a question. What is the Torah, the Talmud, exactly? Like the Babylonian Talmud, and then the aisles on the side are rabbinic interpretations. But the Talmud itself is an interpretation of the oral law given to Moses at Mount Sinai, correct?
There's a question for do you want to take it?
Sure, I'll do the brief. So the thing that we got atop the mountain is a double gift. There is the written Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses that we all know and love. And then there's the oral Torah. The best way I've ever been introduced to think about it, imagine you attend an amazing lecture. And you take furious notes because it's some of the most brilliant things you've ever heard in your life. The Torah is the notes. Do they make sense without the lecture that Moses heard there for 40 nights and 40 days? No, not really. And so God gave that too, and Moses delivered it onwards. And we have a pretty clear chain of transmission in the very beginning of Pirkei Avos, of the ethics of our father, which is a part of the Mishnah. It says very deliberately, Moses gave it, to Aaron, Aaron gave it, etc., all the way. We could trace it to our day. And so when it became clear that the oral Torah is in danger of being misinterpreted or forgotten or misremembered, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, so powerful and great that he was referred to simply as Rabbi, because you knew who you were talking about, around the year 250 or so, said, okay, we're going to redact it. We're going to take all this Mishnah, which is the oral Torah that we've been passing on from generation to generation, and put it in a book called the Mishnah. And then for 300 years, rabbis, good Jews, said, wait a minute, did we really understand? Not sure. Let's debate and discuss. And their debates and discussions were redacted in the second book called the Gemara. When you're reading quote-unquote Talmud, what you're really reading is Gemara, which has bits and pieces of Mishnah in it. It is expected that you've already opened the Mishnah and read all of it, which is a separate set of books. And it is of course expected that you already also are somewhat familiar with the Torah and Nevi'im and Ketuvim, the whole entirety of the Hebrew Bible. And to make it even more complicated, because I know what you're thinking, it's easy, man. It's only 3 or 4 books to remember. There are also 2 Talmuds. There's one written or compiled in Babylonia, in exile, and one in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Israel, land of Israel. They are very different. The Rebbe has a great teaching on why they're different, and they're different because one was written by people in exile, and one was written by people sitting at home. It's a very big spiritual distinction. But again, it doesn't matter, just jump into it. You see it, this is like the greatest thing in the world.
Questions for Liel or Rabbi?
So I've always really appreciated, thank you so much, also this has been incredible. I've always really appreciated I think I was pretty young when I first knew that there was a prayer for defecation, urination, and a lot of times I'm like, Baruch Hashem, like thank you. And just to find moments of gratitude with little things that we do like literally every day, hopefully. And so are there any other examples like that that just, for the last minutes that are just really practical kind of embodied ways that we can maybe bring forward, like literally maybe tonight or tomorrow or something like that?
I'll answer it in 2 ways, and I'm sure the Rebbe would have many more. Probably just one way, which is great. So there's a great discussion right in the beginning of the Talmud, attractive between the 2 great frenemies, Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai. Hillel was sort of more, this is very shorthand, but more accepting, more lenient, more kind of open, and Shammai was more of a stickler for rules. And Shammai said, okay, well look, it says that we have to honor Shabbat. So I'm going to go through the entire week, and every time I find a nice piece of chicken, say, I'm going to buy this chicken. And then if I find a nicer piece of chicken, I'll eat the first chicken and reserve the second chicken for Shabbat. And if I find a nicer chicken, I'll eat the second chicken and reserve the third chicken for Shabbat until I can be sure that I got the nicest piece of chicken that I could have for that special celebration. And Rabbi Hillel said, that's right. We of course have to honor Shabbat, but we also have to honor Wednesday and Monday and Sunday, because the miracle of creation is every day. Why don't you treat every day like it was a great celebration of creation, and twice as much at Shabbat? Don't say, okay, well, I'm going to really kind of be very nervous until the one day that I can relax. Wake up every morning and, carpe diem, which I believe is Aramaic. Yeah, right. Just have this feeling of joy and gratitude, which I think is an amazing, amazing way to go through life. You're like, well, why should I be so happy for this amazing meal that hopefully I'm going to have in Rome tomorrow? Just because it's Wednesday.
A question, a very speculative question. So suppose in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, when there's Rashi GPT, version 9.0 or something, and it's no longer just a chat interface, but it's actually specialized agents, each trained in the entire corpus, and much more sophisticated in their intelligence. And when there are not just a couple, but millions or even hundreds of millions sort of arguing with one another, trying to simulate a kind of interpretation, do you think that if that were to actually come to be, that there will always be sort of an element that will never be sort of captured in the sort of virtual space or in the agential space? Or how would you just approach that sort of a prospect?
I'll approach it pretty easily. As my Ph.D. is in human-machine interaction, this is a question I feel very, very comfortable answering. A ChatGPT type thing could absolutely master the entirety of the corpus of existing responsa and discussions of every piece of religious argumentation ever recorded. However, the most amazing task that we receive, and it seems tremendously daunting, and yet it is the most exciting thing intellectually and spiritually in my life, is to come up with chidushei Torah. New things to say. New things to say about the Torah? There have been much smarter people than me that have been doing this for some thousands of years now, and you expect me to sit here and come up with a new thing to say, and that's exactly the thing. The point isn't, oh, well, do you know how well do you know Torah? Of course it is. Of course you need to learn and study. The point is, how does it go through you, right? There's a great little Hasidic aphorism that I will share, again, contractually obligated, which I think answers this question well, which is a student who's so excited, and he goes to his rabbi and says, Rabbi, I've been through the Talmud twice already. And the rabbi says, yeah? And how many times have the Talmud been through you?
Where does Rabbi Shimon fit into the Talmud and the studies of the Talmud?
Fantastic question.
Rabbi Shmully Hecht, Mishnah, you mean chronologically?
Yeah, how does that fit?
Well, Rabbi Shmully Hecht was a Tana. So the Tana is the end of the second temple, and then the first and the second century, culminating in the writing of the Mishnah, which precedes the Talmud by 300 years, as Liel mentioned before. So Rabbi Shmully Hecht was a Tana, so he lived in a prior generation, and he was one of the opinions in the Mishnah, but is often quoted in the Talmud. The Talmud will often quote. He's also traditionally believed to be the author of the Zohar, which is the esoteric Kabbalah, which is the hidden secret to the Torah. If you notice, Liel doesn't let a piece of Talmud go by without introducing a Hasidic story or a joke. Every time he does it, that reminds me of the dean of the Yale Law School, with whom I used to study Talmud when his father died, and he had never studied Talmud before, Robert Post, former dean, and we used to study Talmud together, and then at one point he said to me, Shmuley, it's just another set of laws. We were getting into really argument, very complex laws about, actually, his father died, so we studied laws about when somebody's father dies, how it changes his obligations to do other things, whether a person can be obligated to do two things at one time, and if you can, which one, the prioritization of what your obligations are. But he wanted more than Talmud. What he was looking for was kind of the esoteric, just only because you asked about Rabbi Shmully Hecht. He wanted the soul of the Talmud. And you mentioned the Baal Shem Tov, and I didn't understand. Liel mentioned the Baal Shem Tov, who was a Hasidic master who lived in was born in 1698, lived in the 18th century. He was the founder of Hasidism, which is the Hasidic writings based on Rabbi Shmully Hecht's writings of the Zohar, which is in the 2nd century. So he's writing with the 1800 year, somewhat of a gap, although it was a Kabbalah. But I just want to say one thing about, maybe we should even end on this note because it's invoking Robert Post and a great story about the Baal Shem Tov.
Getting back to communicating with
the Talmud, yeah. And he says, and so so the dean of the law school, I thought for sure he'd study Talmud, so we studied week after week after week, and he says, no, I want Hasidus, I want mysticism, I want the deeper esoteric parts. So we started to study the writings of the Baal Shem Tov. And he enjoyed it a lot more. And he's they say he was the smartest guy in California. It was a joke, and I used to joke that he was the second smartest guy in New Haven, but that was not a joke. But he loved the Talmud, and so you like that joke, right? I'm not sure which one's a better joke. But anyway, the point is that he wanted to study mysticism, and he wanted to study the Baal Shem Tov. So we started studying the Baal Shem Tov. A long time after that, I asked him, why Talmud wasn't enough? Why did you want to study the Best? Why did you want to study Hasidus? Why did you want mysticism? Why did you want this emergence of Hasidic philosophy based on Rabbi Shmully Hecht's writings of the Zohar? He said, my grandmother, ultimately we found the picture of his grandmother that's now in our mansion at Yale. He said my grandmother would get on she lived in Brooklyn, and she would get on the tram on Pitkin Avenue. So he mentioned the Best, which is an acronym for the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. You should read after you finish mastering the Talmud, or at the same time, you should be studying the Baal Shem Tov. And he says his grandmother would get on a tram on Pitkin Avenue. And he says people would come over to her and say to her, give me a blessing, give me a blessing. It's Robert Post's grandmother. And because you come from Mezhebush. Mezhebush was a tiny little town where the Baal Shem Tov came from. The impression was that the town was such a holy town, a town that could have borne a Baal Shem Tov, was such a holy place that if you're an old lady sitting on a tram on Pitkin Avenue, 300 years after the Baal Shem Tov,
that's where he's buried.
Where he was born and he lived and he was buried, there must be something sacred. So there is another whole component of Judaism, and obviously those are both very important. That's what we should have for you.
So as I'm getting the note here, I want to just leave with an observation of, I think refers to how you said so eloquently, we should really live the Talmud rather than just read it and study it. So the Talmud forces you, in its very inscrutable way, to ask a lot of questions. Why? And here's one question that I asked right away. Like, there are orders in the Mishnah, there are 6 orders in the Mishnah, and one of them, the third one, is about family. Now, if you task me with writing the rules of a family, I'd say, okay, well, we start when a family starts. So maybe with the rules of dating, or the rules of marriage, or the rules of having children. Like, that's when a family starts. The Talmud starts this order with a tractate called Yevamos, which is the rules of levirate marriage, which is what happens if a man, God forbid, passes away, and he has marriageable brothers. They are obligated to offer his wife to marry her. The idea being that you don't want to leave a woman living her life, despondent and with, especially back then in the patriarchal society, with no one to care for. Now you would think, why on earth would you start with something so archaic, and if I may, so freaking depressing? This is not how to sell the sort of, oh look, family law, it's cool, love. And my friend and teacher Rabbi David Beshevkin gave me a beautiful teaching. He was like, think about what the Talmud is actually saying. Ask the question. The question is just what you asked. What is family? And here's the Talmud's answer. It's not, hey man, we're having a destination wedding and it's in Maui and we'll all have linen suits. It'll be great. Come hang out. Hey man, come sit on the deck and drink beers. It'll be fantastic. Family is what happens when, God forbid, there is tragedy.
Yeah.
Who's going to be there for you? Who's going to stand up? Who's going to really say, you know what? I meant what I said when I said we're blood now. So here, I'm going to do this very difficult thing. And it's a reminder for us to be there for each other. At which point I want to say I am so sorry for this silly timing. And I am so grateful.
Great trip to Rome.
I will be flying in more ways than one.
Thank you.